So I want to take care of some housekeeping business first. So if anyone wants the bathroom, if you go through the doors out here into the anteroom, which is known as the narthex, there's a stairway going downstairs, and the restrooms are downstairs. And so tonight's forum, first of all, I want to say thank you all for coming. I haven't seen this church this full in a long, long time. But at any rate, I appreciate all of you coming out in the rain. And I also appreciate people leaving their, their T-shirts and hats and things that indicate who they are supporting at home, because this is an informational gathering forum. It's not a political rally. So you're free to have those anywhere else that you would want, but this is an informational gathering forum. So tonight, all the questions will be in written format, and we have two runners. We have Straith Sartu and Lee Livick, who have cards and also have pencils for if you don't have a pencil to write with. She has those, they have those, and you can write your questions. Just raise your hand if you either need a card or you've written a question and you need to have it picked up. And then we also have some sorters here that are from League of Women Voters. There's Shelley Higginbotham, Christine Parker Kennedy, and Nancy Sweet. And they are here from League of Women Voters. This is a joint forum that is being conducted in partnership between the Atascadero branch of the American Association of University Women and the League of Women Voters. So I'm just very pleased to have all of you here and to get the information that you need to be up to speed with the vote that you're going to be casting during the election. So let me tell you too a little bit about how the forum is going to be conducted. Each of the candidates will be given 3 minutes for their opening statements and 3 minutes for their closing statements. On the cards where you write your questions, if you want to ask a particular candidate your question, if you would put their name on it so that I would know who to ask that to when the questions are brought to me. And so that person for whom the question is asked will be given 2 minutes to respond to the question. And then the other candidate, if they also want to comment on the question, will be given 1 minute to do so. When each person is speaking, when their allotted time has come down to 30 seconds, Brenda Ernst here will hold up a card that says 30 seconds and then stop at the end of the time. And if they don't stop, I will step in. So at any rate, that's how the forum will run. It's estimated that it may take about an hour and a half to 2 hours to, complete all the information gathering. So, we'll start. I guess we should start in alphabetical order for the opening statement, and we'll do reverse alphabetical order for the closing statements. So Susan, would you like to start off with your 3 minutes?
Thank you so much. Okay. Do you mind if we stand? Okay. I think that might be easier so that, Heather, will it be workable if we stand? Okay. Thank you. That way I can see your beautiful faces. And I love that. So I'm Susan Funk, and I want to be your 5th District County Supervisor. I am a mother, a business owner, and a council member, and I'm committed to making government accountable, transparent, and responsive to you. I'm not in this to build a political career. I have stepped up to run because I'm passionate about government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and of making this community work together. I have, as a council member, ended up being very active at the county-wide level. So I'm actually the one with more experience in bringing people together for county-wide level change. And that, seeing the needs that we have county-wide, and the need for the county to work with the cities and with each of us to move forward, that has prompted me to want to run for county supervisor at this time. Because frankly, I'm just the right person for the job. And we'll probably both say that, but you know. So I've owned a business for 30 years doing data-driven management consulting. So I'm all about results. I have an MBA from Stanford with a certificate in public management and concentration in healthcare. And as a council member, I've really worked at bringing people together on those tough issues, getting mental health integrated into our policing, making sure that our public safety has the resources it needs to function, tackling homelessness in our community and countywide and playing a leadership role in that, and making sure that when we are doing the issues in the city, that everyone has a voice in the decisions that shape our future, including after we got Measure D20. I went out and reached out to everybody that had contacted me as a council member, irrespective of their political affiliation or which side of what issue they were on. None of that. Just wanted everybody to have a chance to be part of the discussions, because I passionately believe we make better decisions as a community when everyone's voices are heard. And that's the spirit I will continue to bring to the County Board of Supervisors, where, as you probably have noticed, we really need that. Yeah. So I'm not afraid to tackle tough issues to make change. I want to focus us on the things that are critical to our future: fix housing and homelessness and water, and maintain our roads and our public safety. We've got work to do, and we'll dive into each one of those areas as we go. So as we listen today, just think about who it is that's got the commitment and vision and somebody you can count on to deliver for you is in moving our county forward. Thank you.
All right, we officially have 4 Heathers in the room. Like, this is pretty odd. 5? Do we have 5? We might have a 5th. All right, love it. So good evening, I am Heather Moreno. And I want to thank the AAUW and the League of Women Voters for pulling this together. It's a lot of work, and I really appreciate what you've done to make this happen. And to the NAACP for extending this to your membership and inviting folks, Community Church for hosting this. It's a big deal. And for all of you to be here and listen to the issues that are important to all of us. So I am running for county supervisor because I believe our county needs leadership. Leadership that will, number one, I'm straying outside of the box. Leadership that will, number one, support public safety in all the ways possible. 2 is going to take an approach to protecting the taxpayer that makes it affordable for families to live and work here. And 3, we'll look at our homeless problem and bring intelligent, accountable, and compassionate solutions. As mayor, I have made it my desire and my work to embody our shared values of community, compassion, and collaboration. And I care deeply about the health of our economy and the health of our community. So a little on my background. I have a BA in accounting from Cal State Fullerton, and then I went to work for KPMG, one of the big 4 international accounting firms, and got my CPA license. Then I did a bit of a career shift and I got into health and wellness, something I'm really very passionate about. Then I went and got a graduate degree in theology because, of course, why not? So I went to Fuller Seminary and did that. And I think this diversity of experience has served me quite well in public office. So as mayor, I have really made it a point to lead with open and transparent government that is responsive to the people, with civil discourse and building consensus. So the issues I've focused on have been things like fully funding our public safety, making sure they have the resources they need, taking a balanced approach to homelessness, where we treat those in need with compassion, we get them the services that they need, but we also have order and we uphold the law when necessary. I've also supported policies that make it easier to get projects through the city, whether it is commercial or residential, projects that our city needs in order to flourish. And I also forged a regional partnership to bring broadband to the city. So we are 10xing speeds, we are saving taxpayers $500,000 over the next 30 years, and we're priming new competition so that residents and businesses can prosper. This is the kind of thing that you can expect from me also as your county supervisor, and I look forward to this conversation tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I have two questions here, and both of them are for both candidates. So let's see, we'll start with you, Susan. What is your commitment in addressing the homeless situation?
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So 2 minutes on homelessness, piece of cake, right? So I have, for 3 years, been chair of the Homeless Services Oversight Council, which is the largest of the county intergovernmental committees working on homelessness. And I led the development of the new countywide strategic plan on homelessness that we were able to get all 5 county supervisors to support, both before and after the last election. So, and that happens when you really listen to everybody with a variety of views to make sure that we are getting recognizing the humanity on all sides of this, to the humanity of people who just want to feel safe in their neighborhoods, and the humanity of people that just want to have a place to feel safe and not have somebody throw a beer bottle at them today. So human beings on all sides. I have been tireless in the work to get real solutions for homelessness, and there's a lot more to go. We have to get housing integrated with services to make sure that people can be successful. That has to be organized through data so that we have real metrics of performance, so we can have accountability for the results. And we have to coordinate that across jurisdictions and seek the funding that we need to make that work possible. The question also was about commitment. And so when I stepped up to chair this, the countywide plan on homelessness, the steering committee, I could see that the process was underpowered for real results, and I was committed to it actually being driving action. So I took the business I own and I deferred projects, and I didn't even take a paycheck for my own business for 3 months while I worked on that plan so that we could present something substantive to the Board of Supervisors and really drive action for change for the first time in this community.
Thank you. So I think there are 3 things we need to focus on in homelessness. We have spent millions of dollars in this state. In this county, we've had the 10-year plan, we've had a 5-year plan, and now we're at the back half of 2 years of a second 5-year plan. And we need plans. The money is great, but it's not working. The problem keeps getting worse in California and in our county. So we need to look at doing a performance audit and see where is the money being spent? How is it working? What's working well? Do more of that. Where it's not working, we need to make change. Secondly, we need better coordination, communication at the top. You have entities that are not communicating with one another and people are falling through the cracks. So whether it's the individual shelters like ECHO or 5 Cities or Prado, with adult protective services, with our PUF unit, you've got to have this common concept that everyone gets behind and someone overseeing it all. Also, we do a point in time count every 2 years, which is great, but I don't think we have to wait 2 years to get the information. In Atascadero, we are on the ground. We know our unhoused population. We know the numbers. I think we can get that information more regularly and be on top of that. Lastly, we need to balance compassion with accountability. So in Atascadero, we have officers, mental health workers. We partner with ECHO, with the community action team at the county, and we are helping these individuals get services. We are connecting them with whether it's medication, getting them into shelter, but we also have a camping ordinance, and we're making sure that our neighborhoods are protected, and when people are breaking the law, they are being held accountable, and both need to happen, and that needs to be part of the common concept. Thank you.
Okay. And the second question, and I just got a message saying that all questions will go to both candidates and that they won't be directed to any one individual. So I guess we'll start with you, Heather, since we, okay. What would you do differently with safe parking over at the Kansas-Oklahoma site?
I would not have, I can't stand my box, Heather, I'm sorry. I would not have passed that. I think it was a disastrous decision from the get-go. There was some funding, somewhat of a plan, but it was very scattered. Things weren't followed through. We've ended up with crime, with children at risk, fires. People have died. This has been a horrible, horrible situation. I think you had way too many people there. You had cars being towed in and just left there. The type of 90-day program we have at ECHO, the intent was to, kind of have people moving up and out. Didn't happen, and it has become disastrous for the community and for the people that are living there, and now the county is being sued. So I would not have voted to do that without the follow-up to make sure that it was working. I think if you're going to look at safe parking, it needs to be done smaller. You can't have a large area, and there are very many reasons for that. And you find the people who can oversee it and have the accountability. This was a mess from the get-go.
And Susan, you two have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I agree that this has been a very challenged project. It's important for us to think of what else would you have done with the people that were lined up in Los Osos and Oceano, in street after street in vehicles, and creating real challenges in those neighborhoods. The critical thing is to learn from this project. Lesson 1. This project points to the need to have the very kinds of county staff leadership that I have advocated for and that are critical to the critical element of the countywide plan that is 18 months into its implementation. Because that was done before there was any dedicated county staff to do anything but process grants. This was Public Works and Parks saying, flat space where people can park, we can do a flat space. Okay. Obviously, more is needed. We have to integrate the services into the shelter or housing from the get-go. We have to locate these kinds of projects near the supportive services and near the infrastructure that they need. This site couldn't even get the electricity to be able to handle all those RVs, so they were running their generators all the time. Everybody loved that it was remote because the favorite location for the homeless is far away from me. But it's too far when you don't have it close to services. People can't get their way out of homelessness. So you have to integrate the services into the project from the start, have clear expectations, and yes, do it smaller on scale. The critical thing is to build mutually supportive communities so that you can leverage the staff time and actually build pathways out of homelessness, get people into permanent housing like we're doing at ECHO and the 5 Cities Cabins for Change, that is using the same ECHO model. Thank you.
Don't sit down for too long. You're going to be up next. The next question is also about homelessness. And so I just also want to say that I heard on the news that half of the people in the United States who are homeless live in California. So anyway, that was not a question.
Oh, okay.
Can you explain how homeless services are funded and why the count is so important?
Okay, so the funding stream for homeless services is extraordinarily complicated, and that adds layer after layer after layer of administrative cost to the program. So it is funded in this county through a combination of programs from the Housing Urban Development for the feds that include subsidies for housing, subsidies for homeless services, grants to the that we distribute to the organizations that do them, state grants that are implementation of federal grants, a small amount of local support from the County Board of Supervisors, and one of the things that I have advocated for is to work for a combination of clear performance accountability and less red tape, because the amount of money that's spent reporting on the grants, because every single piece of grant funding is reported on in terms of the results achieved and who got that money and how it was spent, and it is a challenge to do that. Or in the future, one of our key areas of funding for operational work in homeless services will be to integrate that into the healthcare system through a program called CalAIM that recognizes that homeless people generate enormous costs to on the public, to public and private entities, and it's hard to capture those savings by eliminating homelessness in any place but healthcare. The CEO of SenCal Health writes a check for several $1,000s anytime somebody who's unhoused shows up at the door of the hospital. And so that adds up pretty quick to better ways to spend that money. And so over the long term, that's going to be an important channel to get sustained funding for the operations of places like ECHO so that they can move people into permanent housing and get them off of our streets and out of our creeks.
So do you understand now why it's also complicated and hard to make it work? It's very convoluted. So let me talk about, there's a couple of other funding streams. I know a lot of you in this room volunteer for ECHO and other organizations, and you donate. So our community is a huge funding stream for certain services. You also have funding streams that sometimes follow individuals. So whether it is somebody might be a veteran, they could have Social Security. Some people, believe it or not, can also have a trust, and they have money that can take care of them, and they, because of various situations that they're going through, they are choosing to live on the streets. So there are other things to look at. The count, it's important to have the numbers so that we know, is the problem getting better? Is it getting worse? I think we need to do it more regularly. As I said in Atascadero, we know our numbers on a regular basis, and I don't see why we can't be doing that county-wide. So I think that's what you're talking about with the numbers. So I don't think it's, I think this is a situation where you've got to look at who's coming into homelessness, how long are they staying there, who's coming out, and where do we need to, you've kind of probably heard that analogy of watching, people falling over the waterfall, and the doctor, taking care and bandaging people up and deciding, hey, let's go to the top of the waterfall and find out why people keep falling off of the waterfall. And that's also a big thing that we need to do with homelessness. And so it's pulling a lot of people together. It's having that coordination at the top, making sure we have that common concept and we're all moving in the same direction. Thank you.
Other Heather, I'm on now, I can tell. Okay, with only two of you, you're going to be speaking first frequently. Oh, okay. So Heather, you will be the first to respond to this one, and you both will get 2 minutes through all the questions. Melissa James, CEO and founder of REACH, a Central Coast Economic Research and Policy Development Organization, said in July that one way of ensuring that the Central Coast has economic opportunities for the county to invest in the development of clean technology and renewable energy. How will you support measures in the county to combat climate change?
So in combating climate change, one thing that we need to do is keep the technologies that we do have. Oh, can you hear that? Everybody here? Okay. Louder. All right. I'm gonna try. All right. So in terms of climate change, we need to make sure that we keep the technologies online that we currently have. And so the biggest technology we have in this area is Diablo Canyon. So it is critical that we keep that on board. I've spoken twice in the last year before the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to support the relicensing of Diablo Canyon Power Plant, and that needs to be done. And in my estimation, this is not a 5-year thing. This has to go on much longer. This has to be part of our clean energy portfolio in California. And to the extent on the Board of Supervisors I have any say in that, I will be supporting the safe operation of Diablo. Other things, so one thing that REACH is really looking at is the offshore wind. Offshore wind is something that will have a very long-term impact on our community. So I think it is a decision that we need to take our time with. There are people way above our level, supervisor, that are going to be dealing with this. The regulations, looking at the effect on marine life, looking at our commercial fisheries and saying, do we want these to become industrialized ports? So there's some big decisions that are going to affect us for decades and decades, long after we're all gone. And so these need to be undertaken very carefully. When we also look at offshore wind, you have several projects on the East Coast that were pulled just a few months ago because they weren't penciling out. So there are a lot of things to consider here, but I think we're basically looking for, and we're talking technology, there are other things to talk about the effects of climate, but really we need to look at all the possible technologies and how do we support that. When it comes to the county, we need to look at how can we be using energy efficiently in our county and making sure that whether it's, solar or the different things that are available to us, that we are doing that.
Susan.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're on again. I trust you can hear me in the back of the room. Good. Okay. So in dealing with climate change, the first thing is to recognize that, as human beings, we are a contributing factor to climate change. And to that work, there's a tremendous scientific consensus in support of that I respect and support. I also bring to this work the values that I learned as a Girl Scout growing up in Kansas, that you leave your campsite better than you found it. Climate change is obviously way beyond the scope of our individual efforts, but we need to do our bit to help out because it's critical for the future of all of us. And secondly, we need to be very cognizant of the effects of climate change on our community so that we are planning appropriately for those effects, both at the sea level, but also in terms of more extreme weather events that we have to plan for. One of the first things I did as a council member was to ask us to look at the data on how risks had changed with wildfire safety in our community, because we were seeing more drought, different wind patterns, and I was hearing people planning for the 1991 fire on the 41. And we needed to look at how these risks had changed because of climate change. Out of respect to others on the council who didn't want to use that term, I just simply focused on the data, and we were able to get something that ultimately married fire science with traffic safety and transformed the city's emergency operations, and is so incredibly valuable that it is being adopted countywide. So when you see Know Your Zone, this is what comes from looking at the facts about how climate change is affecting us and making plans to keep our community safer.
Up again. Okay. What is your position on offshore wind farms and battery storage in Morro Bay? What are the places and drawbacks, pluses and drawbacks to both?
So I was, like some of you perhaps, at a recent 4-hour seminar with Senator Laird and Assemblymember Addis and others, looking at the impact of wind farms and the potential that we have. I think there's real potential for us in the community to do that. It has to be done well in a way that respects our environment. So it also, the critical issues are, how does what goes out in the ocean connect to the power distribution infrastructure? And that really is going to happen at one of two places that already have that infrastructure. That's going to be the old Morro Bay Power Plant and or Diablo Canyon. And both of them have some capacity right now. And I do believe that Diablo Canyon needs to stay open. It generates 9% of the state's power. So wind power, as it comes online, can be an alternative, but it's going to take a while to do that. We also have to do that without destroying our local ports. So we're looking at the manufacturing of wind energy probably being better located in places like Long Beach that have that capacity and the deeper ports, rather than trying to dredge up and industrialize Morro Bay. That just would be violence to that beautiful space. But we can look at potentially having the maintenance support and the construction support happening, so people will come and go. It's a 4-hour boat ride to where these things are going to be. So it's not going to be in our viewscape, but we also have to handle it well in terms of its impact on the community. Battery storage is a little more complicated, and we're looking at a variety of options, but that we have to make sure that we've used the latest things in fire safety to do that properly, and that we're working from the facts in a thoughtful way when we make those decisions.
Well, I kind of already I kind of already answered that with my last one. So you know where I stand on wind. It's gonna take a long time to get there. We need to look at all the factors, the impacts on the community, the marine life, our harbor, all of that. So everything I previously said. I do want to reflect on something my opponent said, and that has to do with our fire safety in Atascadero. I'm a little more generous. I think our entire council came to this conclusion. It was a time in early 2019 when California was coming off of a lot of wildfires that were happening. And we as a council said, you know, we want to make sure you, our fire department, have the tools that you need. You tell us what's necessary. And they came to us with Zone Haven, which is now Genesis, but we implemented that citywide, and it is a emergency evacuation system, and it has now become the basically the standard for the whole county. And so I really I'm grateful for a council where we all pulled together to do this, and for our fire department that took the lead, and it's pretty incredible to have this happen. You also have the Fire Safe Council that gets a lot of grant money in terms of planning, fuel reduction, and doing a lot of awareness and education. So our county is really on top of things when it comes to fire and fire safety, so I'm grateful for that.
Heather, you will start with the next question. Do you fully support our county clerk recorder and believe in the accuracy of their voting process?
So as a board of supervisor, what we have control over in terms of the county clerk's office is the budget. So the county clerk comes and says, here are the things that we need to do and that we need to budget. And then as supervisor, I would look at that and say, yes, and we make sure that we uphold that. So I don't have any particular issues with the county clerk's office. I think they are doing the best job that they can do, and I support the right of any citizen to watch a vote count. And when I've talked with Elena, she said a couple of months ago to me, hey, if you want to be, you know, overseeing things, you want to watch, you want to do all that, just let me know. So I've had great communications with her and I don't have any problems. I think when we talk about things at a state level, it's a little bit different. I've talked to multiple people who have received multiple ballots, so voter rolls need to be cleared. So I can see how people get concerned when that happens. You have the Carter-Baker report that said when you have absentee ballots that are just mailed to people and you allow people to go and collect those ballots from them and take them in, what we call ballot harvesting that we do in the state of California, the Carter-Baker report has said that's not a good thing. That opens us up to problems. So there are things just statewide, but in terms of our clerk recorder's office, I don't have any issues.
I appreciate the great attention to the integrity of our elections. It's essential to our democracy that we have elections that we can trust. And I support the county clerk recorder. I think that the work that office is doing is well documented and clear. And the proof is in the pudding. And it's not whether your friend wins or loses. The proof is whether or not the vote counts match when you check them out. The part of the process, they systematically count and check a sample of the ballots so that you have a random sample of each race that is done to make sure that they have integrity. But we've also had recounts, and we've had full recounts of one supervisor race and a fair amount of recount of another supervisor race, and in those over 50,000 ballots that they were checked. The one change was one additional ballot was found with 2 postmarks that could have been counted. So this is an exceptional level of accuracy that we see in the process that we're all counting on. The supervisors do also, besides the budget, need to stand up for the clerk recorder when that integrity is questioned, as we saw in the attacks that essentially drove our previous clerk recorder out of town. And we shouldn't go there. The County Board of Supervisors also has a critical responsibility in determining the final approval of election maps that govern who gets to vote where. And that's a core function of the supervisors that is then implemented by the clerk recorder.
Thank you. Okay, what is your position on the recall of Supervisor Bruce Gibson? Start with you, Susan.
I oppose the recall of Supervisor Bruce Gibson, which frankly appears to be an effort to just try to redo the election we just did, and doesn't seem to be based on any particular behavior that's inappropriate. There's a time and place to recall people. And we've had an incident of a supervisor who's now deceased, who the evidence shows took bribes. If he doesn't leave first, I'll bounce him or support a recall, because that's not okay. That is completely inappropriate. And that's the sort of thing where you need to have the resources that include recall to make sure that we have integrity in our process. But we don't need bogus efforts to go back and redo elections that have already been run. Let's work on the next one.
Yeah. So as a leader who works with other leaders countywide, I don't think it is helpful for me to take any position on the recall. So I am not supporting it. I am not against it. I am remaining neutral on that, because that is what I think is best for my community that I serve. So I support the right of any citizen group to recall someone if they want to. That's just fine. But I am focused on my work in Atascadero and on what I will do for the 5th district. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and we'll start with you again, Heather. The county has voted for an independent redistrict commission, an IRC. Do you support this or not? What do you recommend and why?
So I would actually like to see, sorry, Heather. going out of my box. I would actually like to see some combination. My concern with when we talk about an independent anything is that when you're talking people, you're always going to have some bias. It's just natural. We all have certain biases, whether it is political or otherwise. And what we sometimes get in the state of California is we have unelected, unaccountable bodies, say Regional Water Quality Control Board, or what's the one that Cal Recycle? Some of those that put these very onerous regulations into place based on state law, and then are fining people potentially, or businesses, and then there's no recourse. So I don't like the idea of a solely unelected, unaccountable body making decisions. What I would like to see, the process that they're going through to select the individuals, I know they're trying to make it as unbiased as possible. So bring together that independent redistricting group and have them put together a number of maps, and then take that to the elected accountable body and have them decide from those maps. I don't like removing the electeds completely out of the process, because again, they're the ones voted in by all of us and who we expect to make the decisions. So I would like to see a combination.
I am deeply committed to government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And for me, in this county, that means that the voters get to choose the elected officials. The elected officials should not be running around selecting their voters. So I support an independent redistricting commission in this county. Rather than being one of these appointed bodies that that the political leadership appoints, this is selected by a largely objective and random process, where people who have certain qualifications and who aren't engaged actively in the political process, in donating to or serving on campaigns, can step up. So, school teachers and others with analytical skills, county employees who work in analytical jobs. Those kinds of folks can step up to volunteer for this, and then they're randomly selected for an initial group of 5, and then the rest of the people would be selected by that group with an intent to get balance. So it is a trust in the people to make the right decision in the long term, and to introduce less bias in the process than any process that involves the elected officials getting to choose their own voters. We saw what that did to this county in this last election, and we've got to do better. You can count on me to defend your right to have a government that works.
Okay, next question. Funding law enforcement seems to be a priority, which often is not preventative work. Should tax dollars be used for prevention versus enforcement?
Great question. First of all, I think we need to think holistically about public safety, because it's, at the county level, it's not just law enforcement, but it's also the jail and the DA's office and juvenile detention. It is public works, public health. It is fire prevention. All of these are critical to us being able to build safe communities. I have fought for us hard in favor of adequate funding for our public safety functions in Atascadero, and stepped out to lead the conversation with the public in support of Measure D20 after all 5 of us on the council voted to put that on the ballot. So it's, my name is on the ballot argument in favor of that. And I recorded videos and had lots of conversations with people because we desperately needed to have adequate funding for that public safety. At the same time, we've approached getting mental health integrated with our law enforcement, because preventatively, we know that if people are properly cared for and properly housed and they have the supports they need to function as human beings, they're much less likely to create law enforcement issues. Our outreach team was just telling me the other day about one single individual who was unhoused who had generated 250 police calls in the course of a little over a year. And they were ecstatic that this person had now gotten housed, wasn't generating those police calls, and was thriving, looking good, feeling healthy. And they're just like cheering. Go, Rhonda. So this is the preventative work is integral to the success of the law enforcement efforts.
Shirley, you mentioned with one of the recent questions, you said that, didn't you say like half of the homeless or a third of the homeless are here in California? When Prop 47 passed, we had about 115,000 homeless people in California, and that has increased nearly 50%. So part of the issue is that we were looking at, people often look at enforcement or people being put in jail as, well, we don't want people put in jail for petty crimes, but now they're out doing petty crimes, and often that is helping to feed an addiction, and they're not getting the help that they need. And sometimes what they really need is a week or 30 days to dry out in jail and take court-ordered care. When we're not able to do that, we don't have a lot of enforcement mechanisms. So we are sitting here in Atascadero, for example, on the ground with individuals day after day offering them services. The number of individuals that accept those services is not large because we don't have a mechanism by which to coerce, if you will. Now, the governor has put into place Care Court, so community assisted recovery empowerment. And by the end of this year, our county will be required to bring that online. And so at least that is a way where somebody, a family member, a teacher, a police officer, somebody can say, hey, this person needs to be in Care Court. And so that's for somebody with addiction, with mental health, severe mental health. And hopefully this will start having an impact, but until we can have some sort of enforcement and coercion, it's hard to have that prevention because we are asking people who would have typically been in a custody type situation to make a good decision, and they're not always willing to do it.
Okay. In 2020 world, you support another ballot measure in the future? Would you support another ballot measure in the future? I don't really understand the question. Measure D20 made it possible to support our police and fire departments. What has your position on this? What was your position on this in 2020? And would you support another ballot measure in the future?
All right, now we're on. All right, good. So my position on D20 from the get-go was we need this. I went into my city manager's office one day in late 2018, and I said, we need to look at finding a way to fully fund our public safety, to better fund our services. We need to talk to the public. We need to get out into the community and really start having these conversations and see what do our residents want. And so I worked with my council and with the Chamber of Commerce, and we launched Talk on the Block, and we started going into the communities to talk about our financial situation and show people the real numbers in ways that made sense, not this big, hundreds of pages budget, but really talk real numbers. And our community said, we agree, we would like to have public safety fully funded. We would like to have a more vibrant downtown. We want to make sure that city employees are taken care of. And so we voted 5-0 to put it on the ballot, and I supported it all the way. And in doing that, I actually had a challenger in my 2020 race who said he didn't agree with me putting 2020 on the ballot, and I was called Tax and Spend Moreno and all of these things. And then another person came into the race thinking, I can win now. And so we had this threesome in the race, all because I had put D20 on the ballot. And you know what? I would do it again because it was the right thing. Now, will I vote for another tax measure? I always have to look at a tax measure that comes before me and see what is needed, what makes sense, what sort of accountability is there? Do the people want this? There are a lot of things. I don't just vote for every tax measure, nor do I say I'll never vote for a tax measure, because clearly I put both F14 for roads and D20 on the ballot, and our community is much better for both.
Thank you. As I noted earlier, yes, I too supported Measure D20. When I came on the City Council in 2018, we were looking at almost 15-year-old fire trucks with no money set aside to replace them. A 70-year-old downtown fire station that didn't meet code, and we were hoping it wouldn't fall down in the next earthquake, or at least the tower wouldn't. We were looking at the hardest worked, lowest paid police force in the county. So in this year, in that year 2020, when we'd been through nationally the brutal impact of the George Floyd murder at the hands of law enforcement elsewhere, and there was such consciousness about what is the role of policing in our community, I asked those who came to us questioning funding for police to look at what was happening in Atascadero, that our police officers needed better support. We were risking only being able to attract the rejects from places like Minneapolis or small communities in the Central Valley, or frankly, people who would be attracted to policing in our community because we're so white. And none of that was good to the objectives of the people who were concerned about the human impact of how we do policing. So I encourage them to join with us and support Measure D20, and it has been powerfully effective in our community in improving not only our police and our fire, where we've got plans now for that replacement fire station in the works, but probably the mayor and I both got briefed on today, and real progress that we're making. Whether we do that again depends on whether additional funds are critically needed or not.
Okay, thank you. Oh dear, this one's written red. What is your stance on ACA 1, which proposes reducing the water threshold from, voter threshold from 2/3 to 55% to raise certain taxes potentially impacting Proposition 13 protections?
Thank you for the question. I support Prop 13. Prop 13 has done a critical job in keeping people in their homes and avoiding the escalating valuations that occur in this environment where we have significantly rising home values. So we're keeping people from being taxed out of their homes. That is essential. There's also a lot of misinformation going on. ACA 1 is part of a set of things that are questioning voter thresholds. Essentially, does it require 2/3 of the voters to pass any kind of tax measure, or are there some things where you can pass that with 55% of the voters, because it's pretty hard to get 2/3 of the voters to agree on anything. We have had a 55 percentage threshold for school bonds for almost a quarter of a century. And if you haven't noticed, Prop 13 is alive and well. So whether the voters choose to adopt ACA 13, ACA 1 would allow a couple of additional indications for types of proposals that local governments could try to see if their voters would approve, that would be at the 55% level until 65% level. It does not increase the valuation of your home. Your home will be safe whether that measure passes or doesn't. And I have as much power to affect ACA 13 as every single registered voter in this room, because it isn't something that we will all vote on together as an amendment to the Constitution. And it's not going to blow up Prop 13 if it passes. I think that we need to have thoughtful conversations about how we finance public safety and other essential functions of government, so we can consider whether or not other opportunities to have a 55% threshold will work. But it's not going to blow up Prop 13 if it passes.
So the county has gone back and forth in its legislative platform. Okay, so my opponent says we all have the same vote on ACA 1, and that's true. But at the county level, that is something that the county advocates for or against. And it is something that has continually been in the legislative platform, either to uphold various tenets of Prop 13 or to, break those down in some way, shape, or form. And so, if you get enough counties statewide saying to the legislature, hey, we want you to make a change, I think that's where people start to fear that the legislature then uses the counties as a oh, hey, well, they all want us to do it, so everybody wants it, let's go ahead and do it. So that is a little bit of a concern for folks. The 2/3 threshold is part of Prop 13. It's, you've got the 1%, you've got residential, you've got commercial, you've got the 2/3 threshold. So I support keeping that 2/3 threshold. I don't support ACA 1. I know my opponent and I differ on split roll. It's something that she would like to take a look at, which means you would actually change that 1% on commercial properties, and you might look at increasing that with market value. She's open to looking at that. I'm not. I'm afraid that that would hurt businesses, either going out of business or they're passing on the expenses to the rest of us, and it's becoming more expensive. Rather than looking at where are more funding sources, I really think the state needs to look at, why don't we stop spending so much money and be more efficient with what we do? So whether you're talking high-speed rail or the various places that the state just willy-nilly is spending a ton of money, I think it frustrates all of us taxpayers when they say they need more and more, but they're spending it in ways that really aren't helping the majority of Californians.
Okay. What have you done to create a government that includes diverse viewpoints in Atascadero? What is your plan for diversity at the county level?
My viewpoint is simple. We welcome everyone and we treat everybody with respect. That's the bottom line. And I've done that my entire time on council and as mayor. I have welcomed everybody. I've had conversations with anybody that wants to have conversations. If you talk to anybody about the way that I lead meetings, everybody is welcome. Everybody has a chance to speak. I'm always making it as, hey, last chance, anyone else? I want to make sure all voices are heard. I want anybody to talk to me, to the council that wants to. Our community is better when we're all involved. People will often say things like, government should act more like a business, should run more like a business. Well, in some ways, sure, we should learn to be more efficient, for sure. But business makes decisions in a back room with some stakeholder, with a board of directors or a management group, and they move forward as they should. But that's not what you want your city doing. That's not what you want your county doing. It has to involve all of us, and therefore a public process takes time. And it takes time because we want all of our voices heard. And so whether that is through outreach, I was talking about Talk on the Block, that is something we're starting up again with the chamber. And we need to make sure that we are reaching out to all members of our community who want to be involved and want to be providing input and maybe even want to get involved in government. I welcome that. And thank you for that question.
Likewise, thank you for the question. It has been a passion of mine to make sure that we are hearing broadly from the whole community in city work. So when Measure D20 passed, and we had a extensive set of outreach discussions, in addition to inviting all of my friends and the people who had contacted the council in any way, whether they're in the Republican Women's Club or the Democratic Club, or were, for or against mini storage or whatever. I also reached out to people that I thought were voices that we didn't hear from enough, and that had raised some of the issues that we heard during that year when we were looking at Black Lives Matter, and people who had raised social justice concerns. And I invited them to drop into Saturday afternoon open mic Zoom sessions to just talk, to help people get comfortable with speaking about those issues, whatever those might be, because those were voices we weren't hearing from. And the beauty of that process, and when they also then participated in the discussions, is we came up with two different things on mental health that I had heard from the same constituent. One of them was, our police need more support dealing with mental health issues in the community. And the other is that our police need more mental health support for themselves because they're really stressed. And the constituent that I heard both of those things from knew that because she had been sleeping on the steps of Atascadero City Hall when I met her. And she knew how stressed the police were. And that got us great agreement from the council to address both of those issues. And 2 years later, the firefighter is showing me an app on his phone where he has support that he can get help when things get hard. That's how we work together and listen to each other and take advantage of the perspectives that we each have.
There is a child care crisis. What steps can be taken at the county level to address this problem?
Thank you. Another great question. Families are struggling right now in our community. They're stressed with trying to be able to make the rent, and the pandemic period was very hard on child care resources. So the Chamber of Commerce in San Luis Obispo has taken a countywide lead in developing friendly workplace standards. And organizations like Wildfields here in Atascadero just got an award for meeting some of those. The county can be supportive of that work, can encourage and invest in child care providers, can set a good example by being a good family-friendly provider itself, and can encourage businesses to adopt family-friendly policies, can work to make child care more accessible to people who may have difficulty affording it, including something that I have been doing in the city that my colleagues may get tired of hearing me from, but whenever we've got some development thing, I'm always asking about, does this accommodate child care providers in this business, and which kind? So whether that's Barrel Creek or any one of these other things, I'm always asking about that. And at the county level, we need to be attentive in the unincorporated areas of the county to where child care that supports people in Templeton and Los Osos and New Pomo can be located and co-located with other services and made accessible so that our community can gradually get better child care resources, and make sure that those are integrated into the plans and the developments in neighborhoods, because they are essential to the quality of life in a neighborhood.
I agree with the $3 million that the County Board of Supervisors voted to invest into childcare. I think it's important because childcare, beyond just healthy communities, it's essential to our economy so that parents can work and we can all be thriving. So one of the things that's happening is County Superintendent Jim Brescia is working with training healthcare workers or child care workers. And part of that money is helping to subsidize and guarantee certain wages. But in training them, then making them available for childcare programs that can be created. So I think there is some possibility there. We've talked with him recently about the childcare opportunities in Atascadero and what's happening with one of the current elementary schools and how could that be expanded. So I think whether it's cities or counties, what we can do is we can make it easier for businesses to locate with our zoning. We can make it where, it's hard to just give money. You've got to have the money to give the money. But how do we make it easier for a business to start, for a business to have a co-located childcare within it? There are a lot of businesses that are doing that countywide, and I support that. And so I think it's something that a lot of work still needs to be done on, and I fully support that.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on ADUs, and will this be a continued building practice in the future?
Yeah, so ADUs are accessory dwelling units. It's what we've typically referred to as granny units or secondary units. And recently, the state passed some legislation to streamline the process. Can you imagine the state streamlined something? Isn't that awesome? So they did. They streamlined ADUs, and so in the city now, you can build an ADU, and if it's 750 square feet or less, no impact fees. Over 750 feet, you have reduced prorated impact fees. We also, when I was on SLOCOG, I voted as part of the REAP funding to move forward with doing stock ADU plans, and Atascadero took the lead on that. And now we have stock ADU plans where somebody can come in and pick a plan off the shelf and save themselves a lot of time and money in putting that together. So right now in Atascadero in 2023, we had a banner year, more than 30. There were years where we might have 7. So we've seen a significant increase. And I think this will be a really valid way for us to address the housing situation that we have, one of the ways. And we also have to make sure that those ADUs, and this is in state law, aren't simply just used for vacation rentals. So we're making sure that they are being used for housing, because if you're going to get these benefits, there needs to be the benefit in return that we're getting housing for it.
Thank you. I too have been a big supporter of developing stock ADU plans and other mechanisms to make it easier to build accessory dwelling units. And one of the key reasons to do that is because as you look at how housing opportunities are funded, most of our more affordable housing is developed in big projects run by People's Self-Help Housing or HASLO that are financed through federal tax credits. And those projects take 5 to 7 years to develop and require 6 to 8 different sources of funding to be blended together. Let's talk about lack of streamlining. So the opportunity exists for people to do ADUs. And this is something when I was talking about the developing homelessness plan, I took to the Chamber of Commerce in SLO and challenged the construction and finance people to get on board with this, to make it easier to finance and build ADUs, and encourage people to take that option and rent it out to somebody who's going to work at 40 Prado or Echo, or Transitions Mental Health, or a young person who is building their career in the building trades, or other opportunities here in our community, because we need housing that younger people can afford and that multi-generational families can use. So ADUs are an important element of moving forward, and we need to support them. The other thing is that you don't have to ask all these government permissions to have a person do an ADU at their own property, and the homeowner wins and also the renter. Last thing, we also should make it possible to do tiny homes on wheels. Not because they're necessarily cheaper, but because it changes who has to make the investment. So there are a lot of seniors who can't otherwise invest in an ADU, but could build a concrete pad for somebody else to put a home. And either way, there's value added to the property, and there's an opportunity for housing in the community.
Okay. Thank you. How can you find a balance between development and the impacts of development, such as traffic, water, etc.?
This is the, okay. This is a moment of silence. Okay. We are back now, live. This is something that we deal with constantly, whether this is at the city council or these issues at the county board of supervisors, is getting that balance. Part of it is focusing on what are the critical needs for the community, and making sure that we have clear plans so people know what to expect. As members of the Board of Supervisors or as council members, we're required to be objective, to not be biased when we are evaluating somebody's plans for what they want to do with the property that they own. And you judge that according to clear rules. And you have to hold fidelity to the plans and have good plans so that we are protecting the values of the community and so people know what to expect. So we have fewer occasions when people go 5 years into a project and then realize that it's not going to fly and they wasted all that money. And more occasions where people can build projects that we can say yes to us that allow us, for example, to have more affordable housing, smaller units, higher density, ADUs, all of these opportunities, and not to mow over every piece of open space in the county to get there. We have to have a balance of larger homes and the smaller homes that people live in who support the people who are in the big homes. And right now we're out of balance, partly because household size has been rising and house size has been rising and household size has been falling. And so we need more and more units just to accommodate everybody. So we have to find ways to get that balance, to look and try to also simplify some of the CEQA requirements if that can be done, because it can be an opportunity for people to do lawsuits that are actually not really for the purpose of that, but are just about trying to keep someone from developing a property that they have the right to develop.
Thank you. Heather, how would you find the balance between development and the impact of the development, such as traffic and water, et cetera?
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So part of the balance is looking at where are the resources that we need, where is the infrastructure, and a lot of the times that is in and around cities. And so making sure we first of all look at infill development and that we develop where those resources are available. But overall, when it comes to housing, we need a variety. And so sometimes, we're talking about like, oh, the big homes and then all the small ones, affordable homes. There is a whole myriad in there. Reach had a big I don't know, symposium, I guess you would call it, several months ago down in Santa Maria, and we heard from many employers, and their concern is that their employees can't afford to live here. Their employees aren't looking for, affordable housing, meaning when we say affordable housing, we're talking the low income and the very low income. We need those things, but they're looking for your moderate working person's home. And so we need that variety. The solution to our housing crisis is supply, just plain and simple. And we have to balance the need for more housing so that everybody's grandkids aren't moving to Georgia. And people who want to stay here, the young folks who go to Cal Poly and would like to stay here can stay here. And in order to do that, we've got to balance that need with our community character, our small town charm, and figure out together how does that work. At the county level, we have to streamline the permitting process. We need to make sure we are working to move things along quicker. We can also look at county-owned lands and how can we develop some of that with affordable, possibly multifamily, maybe working with, say, people self-help housing, or a private developer who wants to do market rate housing, but then you've got a portion reserved for deed restricted for, say, county employees. We can look at businesses that want to build housing for their employees. So there are a lot of options and ways to go about this.
Thank you. We have two more questions before we'll start our closing remarks. So this next question is, provide an example of how you played a leadership role in a countywide issue in nonpartisan way, building consensus with stakeholders, along with gaining unanimous support from the Board of Supervisors. That's a long one. If you want me to repeat it, I'm
It's a
happy
very
to.
long one. No, you're fine. One thing I did, and this is, to me, the nonpartisanship is key. Like, this race shouldn't be a partisan race. And if you look at my record, there is nothing about me as mayor that shows me as a partisan mayor. You will see that I work on building consensus and collaborating. And so Mayor Steve Martin and I were good friends. And back in 2019, we were talking about homelessness and how we really needed Paso Robles to be able to sort of take some of that responsibility, because they had a lot of little operators trying to do some things, but it really wasn't working. And so Mayor Martin and I got together along with his mayor pro tem, our two city managers, and Wendy Lewis from ECHO. We got in a room, and it was right that day a pivotal decision was made where Steve said, yes, we are willing to move forward with this. Wendy gets on the phone with her grant writer, and 18 months later, you've got the Motel 6, now Project Home Key, you've got permanent supportive housing, and you have ECHO shelter beds. Recently, they looked to expand those shelter beds by 20, and all they needed was the money for the wraparound services, which was right about $800,000. And so the Board of Supervisors in the first go around, they were like a 4-1. They weren't all that. They were mostly on board, but not completely. I did go to that meeting and advocated for ECHO along with others on the board, and we did end up getting a 5-0 vote to fully fund that. So now ECHO throughout North County has 130 beds, and last year they found permanent supportive housing for 201 individuals and families. So we really look at doing this regionally. I think it is so important for us to be working together, and that's how we really get the important things done.
Thank you. So in my work on the Homeless Services Oversight Council, I had the task of leading the steering committee that developed a county-wide strategic plan. And yes, there have been older plans, and none of them were powered enough to actually deliver change in the community. So I made sure that law enforcement was part of our steering committee to get a full range of voices at the table. We worked together to focus on data to understand the problem. And when the county didn't have decent data, even on how many shelter beds do we have and where are they, I picked up the phone and I called Wendy Lewis and Jana Nichols and Jack Leahy from 40 Prado and started lining out what are the resources we have, how have they changed. And that became a core understanding of our situation assessment that we brought to the Board of Supervisors. We worked extensively with every city. I did presentations to most of the different cities. I also had a lot of conversations in the background with city council members, city managers in all of the cities to make sure that the plan we were developing for how the cities and the county work together was something that could be supported. And then I worked extensively with former state senator Sam Blakesley, and he had a competing proposal and ultimately came out in support of the plan that we put forward. So I worked consistently to get a full range of voices at the table to make sure we were addressing the needs of each area of this county. And we took that with facts to the Board of Supervisors, explained that the problem wasn't that we were spending a lot of money on stuff that didn't work. The problem was he brought a garden hose to a house fire. And we needed an organized, systematic effort supported with data and integrated together and coordinated through the community to get real accountability and achieve that change. And they supported it 5-0. In concept, they put it at 5-0 in final, and they have continued to support it 5-0 after the change of majority of the supervisors. And the go-live date of the data system that will connect twice as many providers as have worked in this before is March 4th.
Thank you. And this will be the last question of the forum this evening. What are your plans for water management in the North County? We'll start with you, Susan.
Great. Are we back again? Can't silence water. This is a critical, now here in Atascadero, I'm on the Basin Sustainability Agency, and we feel pretty good about our basin. It's a groundwater basin, it's good shape. We don't worry too much except for the bills. But the minute you go east of here and go out to, say, Creston, 10 of the top 5 issues are water, because everybody knows somebody whose well went dry in the last thing. So we've got to move forward resolutely with the Paso Basin sustainability plan. That basin right now is, is going down, 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 down. Wet years it'll go back up, but over time the trend is downward because there's much more use than there is replenishment of the groundwater, and it's essential that we get that back into balance. My opponent supports a plan that would give all of the so-called small users 5 times as much water as they currently use. In other words, right now the smaller family users get rights to grow enough water for 5 acres of grapes, and she wants them to have enough water to grow 25 acres of grapes. I don't see how that helps us deal with the fact that there's too much usage relative to the rate that it's replenished, and not dealing with this issue puts people at risk, both in their agricultural work and the quality of their drinking water and their access to drinking water. So we need to resolutely work with the basin. We need to explore new technologies that allow us to populate that basin, including blending water from Lake Nacimiento and recycled water. We need to look at how that will work. We need to also do conservation measures systematically, and we need to measure how much usage there is and make sure that those who, that the incentives in place, like the tiered water rates we all pay, so that those who use water more extensively are carrying a greater share of the costs.
Thank you. Now, I'm sorry.
Thank
You need to answer that too.
So that's interesting. I haven't actually stated that I support 5 times as much water, so I'm not sure where that came from. What I have heard from is the small farmers that got kind of, how do I say this in a kind way? They got messed over with the offset ordinance. And so I've heard from many of them. They're like, how are we going to get our rights back so that we can plant and so that we can make a living, whether you're selling tomatoes or whatever it is. So we need to do something to make sure that those people are made whole. It's a complicated issue, but I guarantee you, if you got some engineers in a room, they would figure it out pretty quickly. And then you bring all the partners to the table and let's have a conversation. This has been so politicized and it is not good for anyone. We need to look at all options. So whether it is recharge, recycled water, we could sell supplemental water from Atascadero Mitchell Water Company. We rarely use our allotment of Nasi water. We could sell that to the Paso Basin. We could sell that south of us. So there are a lot of different options, and it's really just being willing to get people in the room. Another thing that the county is looking at is a Miller plan, which is the voluntary fallowing of land. Because right now, you have some people, just to keep their water rights, they're watering dry land or mustard seed, and that's just bad policy. So we need to make sure that kind of thing stops. The people that need water to grow their crops can do that, and I know there's a solution.
Now I can say thank you. And I want to thank you both for your very cogent and, responses to these questions. They were very on target and very appropriate. So, and we'll start with the closing statements, and you'll each have 3 minutes. And so since we started beginning with Susan, we'll start the beginning of the closing with Heather.
4 years ago, we wouldn't have talked about things like 100-year storms or pandemics. And my leadership these last 5 years shows that I can lead in challenging times. So a lot of crazy stuff is going to happen. It just does. And so I am someone that you can trust to really dig in, get to the bottom of things, figure out how to allocate resources, and make sure that we're all working together countywide so that our communities are protected and that we thrive. I promise to you that I will balance the budget, that I will allocate your taxpayer dollars wisely so that we can have the kind of life that we want here in San Luis Obispo County. And that's the kind of life where public safety is protected and supported, where we have policies that protect taxpayers and make sure that our kids can afford to live here, that families can afford to live here and aren't priced out of our area, and one where we balance compassion and order in homelessness. Those are the kind of things that you can expect from me. I will always listen to you. I will always invite you to be part of the conversation. I think when we work together, we are all better for it. I am really proud to be a candidate who is supported by public safety. They have looked at both of our records and they have uniquely sided with me. And I think it's because they look at our experience. They have seen me on the Planning Commission, they've seen me on the council, and they've seen me as mayor. And I've made thousands of decisions over hundreds of meetings. And they like the kind of policies and the leadership that I bring, and they know that I'll bring this to the county, and they are supporting me. And I'm very honored to have that support. I'm also honored to have the support of small businesses and organizations that are trying to make our life better here in San Luis Obispo County. I would invite any of you to talk with me further. I am happy to answer any questions. I love getting into conversations. That's the best thing about campaigning, is having these conversations with people. This is a little more stiff and formal, but I love those one-on-ones or those small group gatherings. So my door is always open. And I invite you to get involved with the campaign or find out more at heatherforslo.com. And I would be honored to have your vote on March 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being part of this conversation today, because this is how we build our democracy one step at a time, is all of us being able to have these discussions together. I've been, in the course of this campaign, at door after door after door, having these conversations. So housing policy is not just the statistics of reach and the statistics of how our business community needs this housing. It's also Linda in Santa Margarita who's making a go of it because 3 people share a 550 square foot mobile home. And she's looking at investors having bought up the mobile home up the way and flipped it and up the price for $30,000 so that people like her can't afford it. So we're looking for how do we find solutions that work for our whole community. You've heard my commitment to safe neighborhoods, to making sure that our public safety is properly funded. And I too have support from public safety professionals who are proud of the work that I have done and who have worked closely with me in addressing homelessness countywide. We're starting to get traction. And you can see the difference between being in the middle of that and really understanding the particulars of how do we drive this forward and where does it get stuck and how do we get it unstuck and hanging in there on all of the stuff that has to be done in the back rooms that is not glorious and not fun, but is necessary to moving things forward and getting results for this county. You can count on me to deliver those results. You can count on me to work at my tail off. You can count on me to ask the hard questions. And you can count on me to help lead us forward civically as a community with a vision of public safety that includes everyone in this community feeling safe in their neighborhoods and safe in their own skins, no matter what they look like, where they worship, how they identify, or who they love. We can do this together as leaders when we are active and support that. And I will be there. You can count on me. As we move forward, you can count on me to deal with the most pressing issues and not to duck the tough conversations. I was at a conference on mental health and policing, and the police chief in Arroyo Grande talked about the fact that if the conversation you're having is difficult, you're having the right conversation. So I will be there. I have a proven record of taking on those tough issues, working in front and behind the scenes to make good things happen for our community so that we can move forward together in a united way. I invite you to come to funkforsloco.com and join us, join the legions of volunteers that are part of this campaign and support us in moving our community forward together. Thank you.
I want to thank you both just for, for all of the information that you've provided. And I want to thank everyone who came this evening, and I hope that you have gotten additional information that you didn't have before that helps you make a decision about who is the right person for you as an individual to vote for. So thank you very much for coming.